And thank you all for being here. I told Meshach that I'd be happy if there were 6 people. So God has blessed. I'm thankful. And we've already had prayer, so I'm going to go ahead and begin. So welcome to your square foot gardening class. My name is Leslis Casa. I'm a certified instructor for square foot gardening. And let me just start by saying it would be foolish for me to say that square foot gardening is the only method that you can grow food with. But I will be honest and say that it is probably the easiest, most efficient way to grow food that I have found. I started gardening when I was about 10 years old and tried a lot of methods over the years and have found square foot gardening to be one of the best. And I hope that will inspire you to try something today. If you haven't tried, or if you've tried in the past and you failed to garden, hopefully we will inspire that. Because you know what? There's something amazing about being out in God's nature. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. If you have your phones, you may want to have them ready because we will have some QR codes on the screen for some various things. If you want to do a little bit more research or get a little more information and you're not inclined to buy the book, that will give you a little bit more information. And I am not selling books today. I'm sorry. I don't sell books, but the book is available through Amazon. So if you decide you'd like to get the book, it's easy enough to secure. So what is square foot gardening? It is a natural and organic gardening method that has stood strong for more than 4 decades. Millions of people around the world have used square foot gardening with success. It is simple, common sense, and it's fun. And sometimes people don't think of gardening as fun, but this is fun. Take a quick sneak peek about growing more food in a small amount of space. Oh yes, you can grow more food, less space, less equipment, and less water. So if you bought a packet of okra seed and you wanted to grow 16 okra plants, according to the package, you'd want to have your rows 3 feet apart and your okra plants 18 inches apart. And so if you set it up with the traditional method, it would take 67.5 square feet to grow those 16 okra plants. But when you're doing it with square foot gardening, you're each plant in 1 square foot, and then we allow for, a lot of people do it anywhere from a 2 to 4 foot walkway, so we put 3 feet there, and you'd grow the same amount in 40 square feet, so you've saved 27 square feet of growing space that you could use for more growing or whatever you'd like. Now this is significant for watering. You're watering a smaller area, and also when you're doing a traditional type garden, what grows in the middle of all here? Weeds. Okay, so you have less weeding, less watering, and you can grow the same amount of food in a small space. So let's move on. This all began with Mel Bartholomew. He was an engineer and an efficiency expert, and he had a vision of ending world hunger 1 square foot at a time. He's written multiple books. He was featured on public broadcasting system TV, and after he retired, well, maybe before he retired, he took a gardening class, and it wasn't too long he started getting discouraged because of all of the weeding. So being an engineer and an efficiency expert, Mel decided that there had to be a better way to grow. So he started questioning experts on gardening and traditional farmers to see if there was any better options. And he asked them questions like, why do we plant in rows and leave so much space for weeds? Why do we plant a whole packet of seed only to thin out so many of them? Why do we waste water on weeds? Why do we walk on the soil and compact it after we've worked so hard to fluff it all up? You know what the farmer's answer was? Because that's the way we've always done it. So tradition, right, was the way. And that kind of growing works well for a large farm where you have big equipment that you need to get through the rows. But why use a farming method for large equipment when you're growing in your yard?
So that was Mel's big question. So traditional gardening means heavy equipment, tilling, hoeing, lots of watering, but after much experimenting, Mel came up with the square foot gardening method. With the square foot gardening method, there's no weeding, no digging, no tilling, no kidding. And I like to say little to no weeding because every once in a while, some weed seeds will blow in through the air or something like that. But Mel's mix, the material that we grow in square foot gardening, is so soft that those weeds, I mean, they just pull out so easily. You don't need that back-breaking hoe. And because of the system of planting that we do, you can tell, oh, that's not growing where it's supposed to be growing, and you know it's a weed. Sometimes people look at their plants coming up and they say, is that a broccoli or is that a weed? So because of our system, we know where the plants are supposed to be, and it's easier to identify the weeds. Square foot gardening is for all ages, from 4 to 94, and I think kids younger can do it too. And for all physical abilities. Now, I had a friend that had a stroke. He wasn't able to work anymore, and one day over lunch we got talking about square foot gardening, and so he went home and he watched my YouTube channel, 45-minute presentation about what you're getting today. This is a little bit more advanced from back then, but he watched that presentation, started his square foot gardening, and later he came back and said, square foot gardening is like the gospel. It's so easy, everybody should get it. So I'm going to give you a lot of ideas today, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, but I'm trying to help you dream big. So you don't have to do everything that I'm going to be showing you. So why even have a home garden? Self-efficiency. Imagine being able to go out your back door or out your front door and pick some fresh, nutritious produce like lettuce, green onions, radishes, kale, tomatoes, cucumbers, melons, cilantro, parsley, etc., like as big as you can dream. Whatever you like to eat, you can have it growing right there. And square foot gardening, and any gardening actually, is good for your brain. There's some planning involved. There's some thinking involved. And I'm going to say there's a lot of praying that's involved. I pray over my garden, and I suggest you do the same. It's a very pleasant task, and it has great rewards. Gardening also teaches values. It teaches patience. It teaches diligence. It encourages thoughts of nurturing something besides yourself. It helps us to see that we're part of a bigger natural world, that there's life beyond our screens and beyond our own four walls of our home. And it helps us to understand that there are seasons of life to be worked with and to be accepted. It also beautifies it also may relieve stress, anger, fatigue, symptoms of depression and anxiety. Getting outside in that sunshine and that fresh air is just amazing. It's been called horticultural therapy by some, because you get out there and you're hearing the birds sing, that sunshine's coming in your eyes, you're producing all that good melatonin, serotonin type stuff, and I believe we're created by God to live in a garden. It's just a natural place for humans to want to hang out. And it beautifies the environment. This is the garden of one of my students years ago, and she just built this, right, you can see her porch right there. She just built her square foot garden right there, and indeed it was not an eyesore, it was absolutely beautiful. And gardening is an opportunity for you to express your creativity. Think of it as exterior design. You can go out and have some fun. Now, if you have a family, you can start the children with a sandbox. Make them a little 2x2 or 3x3. Put some beach sand in there and let them play in the garden while you work in your garden, and they will have a great time as well. And then as they grow older, they can have their own little 2x2 foot. It's amazing. Children love to watch. Well, I'm 66 years old. I still get excited when I see the seeds popping out of the ground. But children do enjoy that so much. We have 10 basics with square foot gardening. We plant densely. so we don't waste space. We grow up instead of out, so we use trellises. We use Mel's mix, not your local soil that's in the ground. We keep it close to the house so it's easy to tend and to harvest. We grow shallow. You only need 6 inches of Mel's mix for most plants, and we'll talk more about that later. And there's no rototilling or big crop type tilling that needs to go on. And we don't use commercial fertilizers. We use compost. I heard some talking about composted horse manure. Yes, we use compost in the square foot garden. We use it when we're planting, and then we use it again when we're replanting to add more of those nutrients back into your Mel's mix. We keep the aisles narrow, so about 3 feet. If you want it narrower, just depends what you want to get in between your boxes. So 2 to 4 feet is what we need. And then you can be stingy with the seeds. You know, when we grow a traditional garden, we want to plant that whole packet all the way down the 10 or 20 foot row, and then we go back and say they're too crowded and we have to weed them all out. So you've added a step. With square foot gardening, we don't plant that way. You just plant your seed where you want your plants to come up. That's it. And then we plant in squares, and we have a grid. So your planting area that you're considering is this big. That's all you have to be thinking about. And we deal with a 1, 4, 9, 16 guideline, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit later. And then, as most gardeners know, it's a good idea to rotate your crops. And with square foot gardening, we rotate our crops, and we will address that again more in just a little bit. Now there's 8 steps to square foot gardening. Planning your garden on paper. Before you begin anything, right, you sit down and you plan it on paper. Then you lay out your square foot garden, build your boxes and grids, build any accessories like a trellis that you may want. Then we create the Mel's mix. That's our growing mix. Then the general maintaining, watering, those types of things, and then harvesting. And I'm going to tell you, the whole journey is worth it. It's not just about pulling those beautiful long or beautiful orange fresh carrots out of your garden. The whole journey from putting the seed in the ground to nurturing the plant and watching it grow and develop is a source of joy. So, you know what? You're great in my front row. She just cheered me on. I love it. I love it. I have an enthusiastic gardener here. But you know what? We all feel that way, right? It's so amazing once you get going to have that experience. We're going to learn a lot here today, but if you need more information, I did bring the book. Like I said, I'm not selling it after class. If you want to take a look, I can actually pass this around, but I'll ask that nobody linger too long with it because there's probably 30 of you here, and I'd like each of you to at least have a quick peek of what's available, because this book, this 4th edition, actually is loaded with everything from how to do your own compost to the whole system and planting seasons, and it's just an amazing book. So just take a minute or two with it, but we want to make sure everybody has a chance. And then if you want to look at it more later, we'll have it up here for you. All right, when you're planting your garden, this seems like a no-brainer, but not everybody stops and thinks about this. If you don't like tomatoes, don't grow tomatoes. Plant what you and your family want to eat. It'll make it so much more enjoyable. You can plant a different flower, vegetable, or herb crop in each one of those squares, and then plant with your harvest in mind. So if you want a lot of tomatoes and only a few radishes, plant more tomato plants and less radishes. You don't have to plant all the squares at one time. When we are planning, so see this QR code here? That will bring you to more information about planning your square foot garden. But, so you have your piece of paper, and you can see that they've got the 16 squares. It's 4 feet by 4 feet, and she's just writing in there what she wants to have in each one of those squares. And the garden plan that you see here is what they call the salsa garden, where you're growing things that you might want to put to make a salsa. Now, this type of planting and planning, that was such a paradigm shift for me. I remember my first time kneeling in front of my square foot garden bed, getting ready to plant, and the first thing I do is I took my hand and I went like this and I made a long row. And I thought, whoops, wrong thing. Wipe that all out and put the grid on. The grid helps you think and plan. It's part of the square foot garden, and it really simplifies things so much. So when you're planting, this is a bird's eye view of somebody's yard here. They've got their house and things. When you're doing it, you want to kind of get as close to the house. If you don't want to have to walk too far, get it kind of close to the house. Look for an area that has 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. Most plants need that, and some even like more than that. So as much sun as you can get, but a minimum of 6 to 8 hours is really great. And look for an area with good drainage. You don't want your box sitting in an area at the bottom of a hill where you know it's not going to drain. It's going to be sitting in pools. Plants don't like wet feet. They don't want their roots sitting in a lot of water. So you don't want that kind of an area. So sun, well draining, that's the main thing on that. And you don't have to worry about where in my yard do I have good soil, although I hear in this area there's lots of rocks. Yep. So square foot gardening is great for you all. But you're not going to be using your local soil with square foot gardening. So rocks are not a problem. If you live in an apartment and all you have is a balcony, no problem. We're going to address that as well. And if you've never gardened, I strongly suggest that you start small. Like a 4x4 or a 2x8 or a 3x6, something like that. Don't start huge, because as with anything, there is a learning curve. And you want to enjoy the journey and not get overwhelmed and quit. It's better to start small, learn, and you can always add. We started with 1 or 2 small beds, and now we've got 5 that are 2x28 and another 50 square feet in my garden, of square foot garden. So just start small, and as you get accustomed to growing, you can add more. And this up in the corner, we're going to talk more about that type of a setup in a little bit. So let's look at some possibilities here. So ground boxes, you can just take your boxes and put them right on the ground. You can put them on a patio, on a deck, on a rooftop. You can put them on a balcony. You can make them 2x2 or 4x4. Like I said, mine are 2x28. Work with whatever area that you have. And I just do want to tell you to start small if you have not gardened before. You can even make a square foot garden so that it's movable. Portable like this. It has a wooden bottom, and you could pick it up and move it. You could put it on wheels if you wanted to. Say you wanted it on your patio and you knew the patio was shifting during the day, you could put it on wheels. These have a solid base to them, and then they've drilled 1/4-inch holes, and the book explains where to put those in there. But you look at something like this, and if you have a husband, wife, and child, you could all have your own bed. And I know a lot of gardeners who this is my garden, and they really don't want anybody else in their garden. We've nurtured this, and it's our little babies, you know. And then with square foot gardening, 6 inches deep. A lot of people say, really? Mel originally said 4 inches deep would do it, but nobody believed him. So he went with 6 inches deep, and yes, you can grow sunflowers in 6 inches deep of Mel's mix. It does really work. This is some eggplant from one of my students, and she had a 4-inch bed, and she had all this prickly grass and stuff coming up that pushed up that bottom weed barrier under there. So she literally had 4 inches or maybe even a little less, and her tomatoes and her eggplants were absolutely beautiful. Now, there are some exceptions to the 6-inch theory. If you're growing things like indeterminate potatoes that need to have layers, or long carrots, leeks need to be hilled up, then you can add what's called a top hat. And I have one here that I can use as a top hat. It's just It's just a wooden box, and you can make it 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. You can make it as long as you want it. I'll stand it up like this. And you put that on top of the area that you need more height to. So if I wanted to go 3 square foot of carrots, I could put this on top of my bed, put a little extra Mel's mix in there, and now I've gone from 6 inches to about 12 inches, and you can have very beautiful food growing in there. Now my beds are 8 inches deep because I use block, so all my beds are block, and so it's 8 inches. And my sweet potatoes grow amazing with 8 inches. We had about a 26 square foot area, 2 by 13 feet. And we got 220 pounds of sweet potatoes out of that with the square foot method. So you don't have to have as deep as you might think for some crops. Now potatoes, I don't know if probably gardeners who are experienced know this, but potatoes are like tomatoes. There's bush variety and there's ones that grow continually. So if you're growing a determinate or a bush style potato, you don't have to hill them up. They all grow in the same level. So I grow Yukon Golds and I grow Kennebecks because those all grow in a single level and I don't have to keep hilling up. If you want to grow an indeterminate potato, that's when you grow them in those systems where it goes up, up, up. You have a tunnel and you keep on adding dirt in and they grow potatoes all along the way. So potatoes are like tomatoes in that area. You have ones that kind of come on all in one area, and you have others that will keep on growing. So I would say in a square foot garden, it's good to get a determinate variety potato unless you want to do a whole lot of hilling or grow in some sort of a container that you can keep on adding up like that. And here's one of my carrot harvests. They grow quite well when you have a little box on there. So when you're doing a square foot garden box, you don't want it to be any wider than 4 feet. And they found that no matter what the size of the person is, from the tip of your finger to your armpit is approximately 2 feet, or a little more comfortably. To try to reach in more than 2 feet is too difficult. So make sure, so if you have a 4x4 and you can get in from 2 sides, you've reached the whole garden comfortably. So when you're making your boxes, or think about no wider than 2 feet. A 4x4 is really workable, but I think at times it can be a little crowded. Note that this young man has a couple of empty squares there. Now he could have put something fast, see, right in front of that cabbage, if you know what cabbage is, right here. Right in front of that cabbage, he could have put some fast-growing plants in there and maybe already harvested them. He could have put some radishes in there. He could have put some spinach in there. He could have put some lettuce in there. And then when those, were ready to harvest, there was room for that cabbage to expand. So we want to think about that, and that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't put like 4 cabbages right in the middle of the square foot garden, because they do take a little bit of room. They're better to grow on the edge or on a corner where they have a little bit of room where they can expand like that. And you can put in seeds, you can put in plants that you get a local nursery, whatever you like, you can put those in. You do have a better variety to choose from when you put in seed rather than you go to the nursery, but the nursery often carries the most popular varieties. So our boxes, they can be square or rectangular. Round is a little funky because then you might have some squares that are only a half because of the curve. So square and rectangular is best. You can make them out of wood, you can make them out of brick and block, vinyl, stone, bamboo, metal, whatever you want. As long as it holds your Mel's mix in and it's not toxic, you can go for it. And you can use wood construction, which is the main one that they show us in the book, although they have pictures from around the world of people who just gathered stone and built their box, because that's what they had. So I have a sample box here. It's very easy. We just went ahead and drilled holes in and just connected the corners with a 2 or 3 inch screw in there. It holds up really well, no problem at all. Very simple. You don't have to be a carpenter to know how to do a square foot garden box. And also, if you go to where someplace like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, they often will have a cart of lumber that is slightly defective. You know, maybe the end of the board is split a little bit and they can't sell it. And they'll sell those for 70% off. That's a great place. Home Depot. Oh, Lowe's doesn't.
Lowe's is 50% off. Home Depot.
Okay, a word from the wise here. Lowe's is 50% off. Home Depot is 70% off. But you can save a bundle and make your beds. So Mel was all about saving money on the square foot gardening because, like I said, his vision was to stop world hunger, and so it had to be adaptable. No treated wood. Don't use old. I'm going to say don't use old treated wood. And if you're going to paint or stain it, only do the outside of the box. Now, I'm not a master gardener, but I'm involved with the master gardeners in my area. And the latest information that they've told me is that since 2003, the pressure treated wood, I got the word for it, is no longer chromated copper arsenic, CCA. They have a new way of preserving wood, and so they've told me, and they had an article that said the current treated wood is acceptable for raised bed gardening. You can do your research on that. Some people are cautious about it, but there's a website here if you want to take a picture of the website, and you can do a little bit more research on that. If you don't like to use a saw, or drill, or hammer, you can get blocks like this. These are from Home Depot. They're 5.5 inches tall, which is the width of a 6-inch board, because 6-inch boards are really only 5.5. So it works perfect, and you can double them up if you wanted to make it. I don't suggest making a bed super tall because Mel's Mix is marvelous, but it's not cheap.
That's right.
And if you're doing, 24 inches of Mel's Mix, you've spent a lot of money that you didn't need to spend. So you can do it this way, and if you wanted, put a false bottom in there, you could do that. I don't suggest putting logs or something like that because they break down and then it sinks. But that's an option. But these little planter blocks are great for putting up corners. Fast, easy bed, bang, it's all together. And then we put a weed barrier in the bottom, and of course that's just to alleviate weeds. A lot of your big box stores like Costco or Sam's Club have it relatively cheap. A 4x200 foot roll might cost you $30 or something like that. So buy it and split it with your friends. I mean, you all could go together and buy one roll, right? And you'd be able to put it in the bottom. So this also helps the Mel's Mix from leaking out. So if you were doing it on a patio or a balcony, your landscape fabric or your weed barrier that you put in the bottom helps it not to leak out. So I just brought a little piece here. So I don't know if all you can see. I'm going to try to do it so you can see. So you can just take I like landscape fabric. It's a little thicker than some of the weed barriers, and you could just cut it to size, and then you could staple it all along the bottom on there. Another way to do it is to lay it on the inside of the box and bring it up the sides. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here. Bring it up the sides, so if you're doing it on a patio or something, you don't want your Mel's Mix leaking out the bottom. So I would usually go ahead and at least, even if I didn't cover the whole box, I would cut strips wide enough to get under the base and up the side a little bit. But if you do it this way, I'll do it this way like this. If you do it this way where you lay it in like that and then you trim your corners, you are going to have a space in between here and there. Those weeds are buggers. They will find a way to come up between. So it's easier if your weed barrier is connected to the box or extends out even a little bit. That's it. I don't want to miss telling you anything. All right, so you want to mow the grass low if you're doing it in the grass area. And then lay down or attach the weed barrier or the landscape fabric, and like I said, attach it or bring it up the sides. But if you bring it up the sides, just beware, you might get some up the middle there. Then if you have issues with voles, moles, those types of things, anything that this list kind of talks about animals that come in from the top. You're putting a grid, putting a hardware cloth on the bottom is not really going to keep animals out that come in from the top, and we'll talk about that later. But if you have voles, and we never needed anything like this underneath our beds until about 2 years ago, and then we had voles that were coming in underneath, and they found our sweet potatoes. And so I'd lose, 20 or 30 pounds of sweet potatoes to the voles. They just, eat half of the potato and then move on to the next one. So something like this is called this is quarter-inch hardware fabric, and you just cut it to size with tin snips, and then you can just staple it onto the bottom. I'll go ahead and pass that around so you can see what that is. And we have not had problems with voles since then. That's called quarter-inch hardware cloth. You can buy a kit, a galvanized raised bed. When I bought it, I bought multiple kits. They were on sale at the end of the season. And I like them when they're in a 2-foot width like this, because I could do a 2x2 for my herbs, and then I could do a 2-foot wide all the way down the way I like it. And you can see here, I did the whole area in landscape fabric, and then I used landscape pins just to secure down the landscape fabric so it wouldn't get caught in the mower when we do it. And if you have, if you have a dry cleaners around you that still uses hangers, you can go ask them for hangers. They'll give you hangers. You can cut them and make your own pins, and you can have hundreds of pins for next to nothing. You can also, if you want something pretty, you can build up and make pyramid boxes. They're beautiful. And I would say don't leave off the grid. It is the reason it's a square foot garden, and it is the reason why it's so easy to plan and plant, is because you have the grid. It just makes everything so much easier. So say you have something like that, you could plant 4 lettuces, 16 carrots, 9 beets, 9 spinach plants, 1 cabbage, 16 green onions, 16 radishes, and that's only 7 of your 16 squares. So you can put a lot in there. And you can make them out of wood lathe, is that what they call it? Those little strips of wood. You can make them out of vinyl. Some people make them out of string. I think the string kind of gets in the way, but I know people who do it. They'll just put little nails every foot and just string their string and make their grids that way. That works too. There's lots of ideas online. My favorite way, when the Venetian blinds die in your house, cut the strings off, save the Venetian blinds, and then just go right up the middle. I'll just make that short so that I don't stand here cutting Venetian blinds for you. And then I have my long strips. And when I put them down in the garden, I just anchor it with one of these. The wind doesn't blow it. You can even put a little rock on each end and hold it down to make your grid. It's super easy, super simple, super inexpensive. Great way to do it. Okay, you've got some. Okay, everybody's got an old Venetian blind somewhere, right? Okay. So this is in my greenhouse. So I use block, and I line the block with greenhouse plastic, and then of course I have my weed barrier underneath. You can see my Venetian blinds in there. And then you plan carefully so that the taller plants are on the north side, and then your shorter ones in the front so that you don't block that sun. And we eat out of this all winter. We have kale. Whoops, what did I just do? Hang on a second. One more. There we go. We eat out of this all winter. Kale is marvelous. You just keep picking those lower leaves. The top just keeps growing and growing. You just keep on picking and eating. Spinach is the same way. You pick off the outer leaves. The inside keeps growing. It just keeps producing all winter. Some people do that with lettuce. So in my greenhouse there, that bed is 9 by 14, and you would be amazed at how much food you can get out of a 9 by 4 bed, or even a 4 by 4 bed. It's amazing. Cilantro, once it grows and it's nice and big, come about 5 inches off the ground, cut it with your scissors underneath, and it should grow back once or twice. So a lot of it is very just sturdy, great stuff. And that will grow all winter long. Now that is in my greenhouse, but I will say I have picked broccoli from my outside garden in December. So if you grow the right crops, you can grow year-round even without a greenhouse. So this is more information on building the boxes, so just go ahead and get the picture of that QR code. And make sure everybody gets that picture. All set? Okay. Alrighty, let's talk about the aisles. So the aisles should be, again, 2 to 4 feet wide, and that's you can kneel, you can walk, you can get a garden cart in there. Your aisles may be grass, bark, gravel, dirt. It doesn't matter. You're not growing in them. The main thing to me is that it's easy for you to work with. So if I was going to do something like this here, I would put landscape fabric underneath that because I don't want to have to pick grass out from growing underneath. But you don't have to do that. But there's a lot of varieties of what you can put in your walkways. The goal is easy to maintain. So we see this garden here, they obviously have some weed barrier underneath even their walkway. But there's a few things I want to point out about this garden. So these here along the edge, 1, 2. They're only 2 feet wide, easy to reach in. If you're up against a fence or a wall or something like that, 2 feet is ideal. Then they have their walkway, and then these, they can come in from either side and get their 2 feet, so that's perfect there. A narrow aisle, a lot of growers, I went down to AdAgra, and I know the traditional way for a commercial grower to grow is a 30-inch wide bed with a 1-foot walkway, because they're trying to really, save as much space for growing, and then they just straddle the 30-inch bed and they work the bed this way. But a 1-foot walkway for most of us is just too narrow. We can't kneel in there very comfortably. Where do you put your feet? So it's just more, for square foot gardening, we suggest something where you can get your little garden cart or your wagon in there and have some comfort for walking. And then I will say this one has pea, it looks like this is a pea gravel to me. Pea gravel tends to shift and it never locks down tight. So it's always like shifting under your feet. So I prefer something like a crushed limestone or something like that. Eventually they kind of all settle in and like a puzzle kind of lock together. But either one would work, but I just found that for comfort in walking, I like that crushed stone better. Another idea here, again, the problem with this one is, can you get a wheelbarrow up there? So it's pretty. It's functional if you don't want to bring in a wagon or a wheelbarrow in your spot. This person put indoor-outdoor carpet as a weed barrier. I mean, if you probably had it up in their attic or something, Now this is pretty and it's inexpensive, but do realize if you have something like this, you're going to be out there with your clippers trimming all around those boxes when the grass starts growing. So if you're going to use something like a weed eater, get something sturdy that's going to be a hold up to the weed eater. So let's talk about growing up instead of out, because especially if we went, let's go back here. If you had plants that were growing out in this type of a garden, you would have, if you had vining cantaloupes growing out here, you would have grass growing up in between all your cantaloupe vines. So in square foot gardening, we suggest you grow up instead of sprawling out. And so this is just some cantaloupes that were growing on one of my square foot gardens. And then, so building the box accessories is not super expensive because you're dealing with a smaller box. You don't have to do a huge, 20 by 30 area. You can put your accessories on these 4 by 4 boxes in smaller areas, and you can even move them around if you set it up right. Let's see. Okay, and then when you have your trellis, you just weave your plants in and out, or you could use, if you've got some baling twine, or you can use little things like these little tomato clips that just clip on. There's lots of ways you can work with a trellis. I really like the baling twines and the clips, but I also have some cattle panel, and we just weave it in and out like that. One way to do it is using electrical conduit, which is kind of pricey. So you can use other materials if you want, and we'll take a look at those. And then you can slip it over. If you bang some rebar in the ground, and then you just put, if you got a 2-inch PVC or an 1.5 PVC or your metal conduit, you just slip it over that rebar in the ground, and that holds it. But you don't want to have, this much rebar. Get a good piece of rebar, slip it over that rebar and hold it up, or put it right inside the box corners and secure it. That's another way to do it. Another option, this was at our community garden. We have a community garden in Tipton County, and this was my square foot bed there, and we just used T-post and cattle panel for our trellis. Now, the cattle panel is only about 3 feet wide, so we brought it up so that my taller plants would be able to be there. And then if they needed support longer, I just tied some baling twine or some string or something from here to the plant until it was tall enough to weave up. And again, you can see the rocks here that I just held down the strips with. Works very well. The vertical frame or your trellis should be on the north side of your box so that you're not shading everything. You can grow lots of things vertical, nice straight cucumbers when you grow them vertically because they hang instead of like, they might get slightly curved, but you're not going to get super curly like you did if they're growing up against a rock. Those are butternut squashes in the middle that were immature, and of course cantaloupe there. Some more ideas for trellises. This one just has some wood, kind of teepee style. This is cattle panel. Make sure whatever you get for your trellis that is strong enough for the plants that you intend on growing up there. What's that?
How do you know how that melon?
God made melons very amazing. If they're hanging right from the beginning, the vine gets stronger as the weight of the melon goes up. Because my cantaloupes, when they get toward, I don't support them. The vine is in the cattle panel, but I just make sure when I know they're getting kind of ripe, I'm out there every day to make sure they don't just drop off. But that vine gets strong to hold it. They have it supported here, and for a watermelon, I'd probably do the same. But it's amazing how well they will hold on until they're ripe, and then they slip off. So you got to be careful. There's another idea for trellising. In this way, you would put strings from the top of that trellis, put strings down, and then use the tomato clips. More trellising. They have string and wood here. Use whatever you've got. I'm just trying to inspire you. Whatever you have, you can try to make it work. Now, tomatoes. When you're growing tomatoes on a trellis, you want to prune in the middle here. They call those the suckers. If you're growing the vining type or the indeterminate tomatoes, you want to trim off those suckers and go up your trellis. Otherwise, they'll just expand and take over your entire trellis. So you want to keep it to one main one. But if you're doing a determinate or bush-style tomato, you still may want to support it a little bit, but they only get about 4 feet tall. The tomatoes mostly come on at the same time. So it just depends, if you want tomatoes all growing season, then you're going to want a determinate, or you're just going to plant more often. But tomatoes have that two type, a bush type and a vining type, a determinate and an indeterminate tomato. And here's some information. It's not a QR, but if you want to look up more information on the difference between determinate and indeterminate tomatoes, there's a website for you that has some good articles on it. Everybody's got their picture? Okay. All right, so I want to show you a trellis in progress. So there were my beds, and I did them 2 feet wide. That's just my preference. I like them 2 feet. And so I got some early tomatoes that were determinate, the bush type. I put them on the trellis side of the bed. And then a little later, I put in some cantaloupe seed on the front row of that bed. And so the back side ended up by looking like this. And you can see right here, there's a little cantaloupe vine sneaking through the bottom here that's coming out over here. So all of these tomatoes are determinate, so they come on in about a week or two. When those were all pulled, I pulled the tomato plants, and then I wove the cantaloupe vines up the trellis, so I got double duty that season out of the trellis. Now, It does take a little timing and experience with this, but that's one of the fun things about gardening. You have to think. And every year you can try something new, like how am I going to get double duty out of my trellis? So keeps you learning. Let's talk about the growing mix. Mel's mix is amazing stuff. And I went down to my greenhouse and I just grabbed a shovel full of my Mel's mix. You're welcome to feel it if you don't mind getting your hands a little bit dirty. But this is Mel's mix, and this is about the wetness of a wrung-out sponge, and that's the ideal wetness for growing. So that's Mel's mix, and we'll talk about what it is. So you don't have to worry about your existing soil in your yard. You're not going to be using it. Mel's mix is 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 coarse vermiculite, and 1/3 compost. And we're going to talk about the specifics of that. It's better than most existing soils. I'm going to say it's better than every existing soil. It's just amazing stuff. Now, you can grow in traditional soil, but this is just easier and very productive. It's usable year after year. Mel's mix should last you about 10 years. The boxes are above ground, so you don't have to till down deep. And it's loose and friable, which means it's crumbly. When I go out there in January or February, I don't need a shovel, I don't need anything. I can dig in all the way to the bottom with my fingers, and it's still light and fluffy year after year after year. It's amazing stuff. All your nutrients are in it because you're using compost in the mix. And 6 inches is indeed deep enough for most crops. So there's a QR code about creating Mel's mix if you want. It's one of the most important parts of square foot gardening. And you have some options on how you're going to do that. We'll talk about mixing it here in just a second. I let those who got that QR code. Yes?
During the winter, it's cold, will not dry out.
If you have plants in there in the winter, then you'll want to water in the winter. But if it dries out in the winter and you don't have anything growing in there, it's fine. And you can put a mulch over it if you want it. I do because it keeps my worms happy. And it keeps any weeds from blowing in early in the year or late in the year. All right, so peat moss. It's a natural product that comes from peat bogs. It's a decomposting plant material. It improves the soil. It helps with water retention. Some people prefer to use coconut coir because it's more of a sustainable product than the peat moss is, and you can use that. It's just a byproduct from the upholstery industry. It's the short fibers instead of the long fibers, and so they compact it. It comes in a compact block. It does break down faster than peat moss, so you might have to replace it every 3 to 5 years instead of every 10. And then coarse vermiculite is mica rock that has been ground up, and then when they heat it, it pops like popcorn. And that's what keeps the mix so loose and crumbly friable. It holds water. It helps the roots to breathe. It comes in a big bag like that, weighs almost nothing. So it's kind of like popcorn. When it's the mica form, it's like the hard little pieces. Then when they heat it, it's like popcorn. It has tons of nooks and crannies where water and air can get in there, and that's so good for the roots of your plants. And then compost, 1/3 by volume. And we use that when we're replanting as well as the original mix. So 1/3 by volume in your mix. And you can make your own compost, so if you want, you can buy it. We'll look at some here that you can buy. Try to get a variety of compost. Now, if you make your own compost at home, it probably already is mixed. Maybe you've gotten some sheep manure from a neighbor. Maybe you've got, food scraps or grass clippings and dried leaves that have been chopped up or whatever, and you've got a really great variety in your compost. But when you're buying your compost, go to a good nursery. Don't go to Home Depot. Well, you can go to Home Depot if you're going to buy the Black Cow or something, but they have some compost, at these big box stores that a cubic foot is $3. A lot of that is going to be sand and pine fines or bark that's been crumbled up. So I would say go to a nursery and get good compost, although they do have Black Cow at Home Depot, and that is a good product. But things like mushroom compost, worm castings, goat manure from your neighbors, or if you have goats. Chicken manure is okay if it's been aged. It'll burn up your crops. It's very hot, so make sure it's aged. And don't skimp on your compost, and don't skip on your Mel's mix. I know someone said, well, the coarse vermiculite is expensive, so I'm only going to use like a quarter of it and do the rest with something else. You've highly altered the mix at that point. Your investment is not in a rototiller when you do square foot gardening. Your investment is in your growing mix. So, and it's not going to cost you as much as a rototiller. So don't skip. Just go ahead and make a really good mix. So when you're making it, you can take it and put it on a tarp like that if you want, and then mix it all together. I will suggest wearing a mask because all of this stuff is dry and dusty, and if you're fluffing it all up, you're going to get it up your nose. So a mask is helpful. Let's see, spread it out on the tarp. Oh, before you measure the peat moss, you want to break up the clumps because it comes compact, the same with the coconut coir. So break it up, get a little hand tool or something, and break it up crumbly before you measure it. Otherwise, you'll have too much concentration of that. And then you just dump equal portions onto your tarp and mix it up. And it's good to go. And so they say for mixing, you can take your tarp and then you can keep pulling your tarp this way and that way, and that will all mix it. That is one method of doing it. You could do equal amounts in your wheelbarrow, mix it up, dump it in, mix up your next batch, dump it in. That's kind of easy. I just throw it all in my bed. I do, we do 1 bucket, 1 5-gallon bucket of each one, and then I turn my rake over and I just cut it so I'm not poking my weed barrier, and I just mix it up and water it a little bit, put in the next load, water a little bit, and just mix it up right in the bed. Whatever works for you, that works, and that's great. I usually just do it by 5-gallon bucket increments. And then shovel it in, water as you go. This stuff holds a ton of water in the beginning because it's dry. So water it as you go. If you wait till you have 6 or 8 inches deep and then you try to water it, it's going to be a lot of work to try to do that. So water with each layer that you put in. And then in a 4x4, it's 4x4 by 6 inches, so that's 8 cubic feet. So when you're buying your ingredients, you know that you need a total of 8 cubic feet. And then don't walk on it. Don't walk on it. Don't walk on any garden. If you're doing in-ground gardening and you rototilled, you don't walk on your area that you just rototilled, right? Okay, planting. It's helpful to know your hardiness zone. I'm going to guess you're in zone 8. I don't know that for sure. I am in 7B, so you got a handout that looks like this. Oh, it's on the table. You got it, Meshach? Okay, Meshach's going to hand that out to you, so I'm just going to go back one slide while you're all getting that. So there's warm weather crops and there's cool weather crops. And you can grow year-round in Arkansas without a greenhouse. Guaranteed you can do it. But you've got to know what grows when. So you can't grow tomatoes in January. But spinach is amazing. And kale is amazing, and broccoli is amazing. So you've got to know the crops and know your seasons. So I've given you, this is from my area because I teach this up in my area as well. So the handout that you're getting goes month by month, and it's going to be very similar to where you are here in Arkansas. So what can you do? You could start inside any of these plants. February rolls around. Some of these plants you're going to go ahead and you can put outside. In February, these are the ones you would start inside. These are the ones that you could start outside about mid-February. And these are the ones that you could transplant if you already had the plants in February. So your sheet has all 12 months, and each month you know, can I be starting the seed inside? Can I be starting the seed outside? Can I be transplanting a plant outside? So hopefully that chart will help you to understand your seasons for your area. And like I said, this should be pretty close. Your season's probably a little longer than ours, so you'd be safe with this one. Okay. Now spacing. Spacing. Large crops get a square. Smaller ones like lettuce, Swiss chard, they get 4 per square. Smaller things like bush beans and spinach get 9 per square. And things like carrots and radishes, they will get 16 in a square. So we're going to show you, this is so simple. This is so simple. Okay, so you have a square foot. Yes? Yes.
Thank you.
This one? Okay. Square foot gardening is really, really popular. If you go online and Google square foot gardening spacing, you'll come up with all kinds of stuff. I think I looked up just before we left how many people are doing square foot gardening, and the web said currently 2 million people are doing square foot gardening. I'm sure that's around the world, but there's a lot of information online as well. So here's your square. 1 out of the 16 squares in your one, okay? So if I was growing a tomato, I would put 1 tomato, 1 indeterminate tomato in the square. If I was doing a bush type, I'd give it a little more space, but 1 in there. So that would go bing, right in the middle. So then, that would be your larger plants. So then when you're doing 4, something like lettuce or corn or chard, you got your square. You just take your finger and you go bing, bing on your square, and you know exactly where to put your plants, right in the middle of each. You don't need a ruler. It's not tedious. Bump, bump, 1, 2, 3, 4. Planted, okay? So then if you're doing something that's 9, like spinach, you take your fingers like this and you go down, across, it's marked in your soil, perfect 3 by 3 squares, bing, 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 bing. You don't have to measure, super easy for planting. So now you want to grow some carrots or some radishes. You have your original square, bing, bing. You've drawn it in your Mel's mix. Then take each of those quarters and just do another one. You now have 16 perfectly spaced carrots without a ruler, super easy to plant. So easy. I just love it. No guessing, no ruler, perfect spacing. Remember to put your, yes? Garlic, I would do 9. I would do 9. There's, I don't know. I'm a certified instructor, so I'm not supposed to tell you this. But I don't necessarily agree with all of their space planting. Like they'll say for cilantro, do 1 or 4. Cilantro, you just scatter it. You know, you might have 30 seeds in a square. So, but most of it, I would say, is spot on. But my experience has said cilantro doesn't need a whole square. You know, you put a lot of seed in there. So most of it is excellent, though. So put your tallest plants on your north side, unless you want to shade them. If you want to grow lettuce in the summertime, you may want to put them behind the tomatoes so that they do have some shade. All right, now maintaining your garden. You water near the roots. Don't spray over the whole thing. You're just inviting fungus and disease onto your plants. I know it rains, but we try not to wet those leaves any more than we have to, so just water down. Near the bottom, there's a QR code there that'll give you some more information about maintaining your garden. Okay, and they have a picture of tying up your plant, your tomato. Okay, then weeding. Weeds are very few in a square foot garden. So there's no weed seeds in the vermiculite. There's no, usually the compost pile heats up, kills the weed seeds. You have your landscape fabric underneath, so your weeds are just going to be what happens to blow in. Easy to pull out, easy to identify because you know where you've planted. You know you've planted in the middle of the spots, right? So you know if it's a weed or not. And then these are the tools you need for square foot gardening. A bucket. Maybe a plastic cup if you want to water by hand, a pair of scissors, a pencil for taking notes, and a trowel. So I don't know what a rototiller costs, but a good one I know is pretty expensive. So like I said, your money's going into your initial thing. So thinning, the reason why scissors are in there, if you plant, say you put two seeds in your hole for your broccoli, because you're not sure if they're going to germinate 100%. So you put 2 seeds in that hole. If you just come along and just rip out the plant, you've destroyed the roots of the plant that's tangled up with it. So we just suggest that you get a pair of get a pair of children's scissors, $3.88 at Walmart, right? Put them in your pocket and then just snip off at the base the ones you don't want. Very easy to do, very easy to work with, and you won't disturb the roots. Now for watering, you can use your 5-gallon bucket that you measured with. Fill it with water, leave it out there. You can water by hand with a cup. You can use drip irrigation. You can use a hose. Again, with the hose, try to get down low. Maybe get one of those extension wands and kind of water close to the ground. And just water according to the plant needs. And if you saw the Mel's Mix that came around, that's about the moisture level. It should feel like a wrung out sponge. So if it's that wet, you're doing really well. Another option is to add some mulch. I like to use oat straw, not hay. Hay has seeds in it. So use straw or chopped up leaves and run them over with the lawnmower. If you use full leaves, they go like this so they act like shingles, and the shingles on your roof keep the water out, right? So chop the leaves up with your lawnmower before you use them as a mulch, but they work wonderful. You can use wood chips, but don't mix them in. Leave them on top. If you want to put wood chips on, put them on, and then when you get ready to replant, brush those wood chips aside, plant, and then you can move them back in. Don't mix them in, they'll eat up your nitrogen. But they're not bad, you just don't want them mixed in with your mix. And then what we've been waiting for, harvesting. Okay, and with the square foot gardening, when one thing comes out, you can put something else in. So we have a system here. Let me see, we're talking about rotating crops in square foot gardening is really easy. So let me give you an example here. So January, February, mid-February, I'm going to put my beets in. Beginning of April, my beets are coming out. Mid-April, my tomatoes are ready to go in. They're growing until about August. August, my bush beans go in. Bush beans are a short crop. Come September, you can put spinach in there, all in one square. You got the whole year, you have 4 crops in 1 year in that square. And you only had to think 1 square at a time. It's so easy. It's so easy. When you replant, just have some of your good compost, put a good trowelful, just like that, put a good trowelful in, mix it in, and replant. Super easy. We're going to talk a little bit about extending your season. You can start earlier in the spring. You can garden later in the fall. You can protect your products from cold, extreme cold. And in the hot weather, you can put a shade cloth over the top if you're trying to grow something like lettuce. You can also protect from animals if you have animals coming in. So seasonal crops are cool weather crops: lettuce, peas, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, collard, spinach, and radish. These are all cool weather crops. This is some cabbage I picked on January 3rd this year. These were not in my greenhouse. Seasonal crops, hot weather: tomatoes, beans, squash, corn, Swiss chard, cucumbers, melons. If you plant in the wrong season, it doesn't matter how great your Mel's Mix in, it's not gonna grow. So know your seasons. You can make a frame. This is just out of PVC, tucked inside the corner or propped up on rebar. Tie it in the middle. You can use that for a shade crop. You can put an insect barrier over it. You could put greenhouse plastic over it. When it's a 4x4, it's super easy to protect that and give yourself that additional season. You can make something like this on your smaller box. You can protect from the cold by putting that greenhouse plastic on it. And if it gets super cold, like we had some single-digit days in the past, I have my greenhouse plastic over that outside bed. I just throw an additional tarp on it for those couple of days, and it does fine. If you have that extra little layer of air in there, it makes a huge difference. Every layer that you put brings you up a zone or down a zone. So it gives you that much protection as if you were living in the next zone down. You can buy something like this. This is a 4x8 my daughter gave me, and you can sit that over your bed if you want. You can just do something simple like this. Let's see. So this was just 3/4 inch PVC. Now you do have to kind of tie it across the top a little bit for support with some string, or maybe even bring one down here so that they don't wobble on you under the weight of your greenhouse plastic. But the hoops like this, and I just anchored those. The PVC would come right over that rebar to make those hoops, and then to throw the greenhouse plastic over it. And if you go to town that day and your husband is home, you better remind him to uncover that, because it's going to be cooked. It gets incredibly hot when you have it protected like that. All right, you can protect from critters in a small area, like a square-foot garden, from cats, dogs, squirrels, rabbits. You can use deer netting. Here's an example, just a small little chicken wire thing to keep the rabbits out. It's easy to protect because it's small. If you have a big area, you can keep the dogs out with the fence. You can have various ones for various growing areas. Here's one of my students. This is her garden in Memphis. They've since expanded it. They said they want to turn their yard into a food forest, and it just about's there. This is another one. This student of mine was in her 70s when she started square-foot gardening. Absolutely beautiful garden. So this is the book. I think you probably all had a chance to look at it really quick. It is available through Amazon. I don't get a cut on that, but I highly suggest Square-Foot Gardening. This new edition has a lot more information about composting, about season growing. It's just loaded. It's just an amazing, all-in-one book for gardening. And here's a QR code for the book, but of course most of you probably know how to find it on Amazon. Easy enough. If you decide you would like to take the course online for Square-Foot Gardening, this is a QR code for 20% off of taking the course online. I have one on my YouTube channel. It's very similar to this one. I did it a few years ago, so it's not as updated. But that's 45 minutes. If you want to rewatch it on YouTube, just go to my YouTube channel, Leslis Casa YouTube. It's on there. That's it. You're all now experts at Square-Foot Gardening. Thank you so much. How long did I take you? Oh, just about an hour, I think. If anybody has any questions now for the group, I'll answer them, or I'll talk with you after. Did you have a question?
Email us the PowerPoint if you wanted it.
Email the PowerPoint. I'm thinking the logistics of it, that's all. Steve, he's my tech man. Is it possible to mail something with 118 slides?
Probably save it as a PDF.
Oh, save it as a PDF. That's a good idea.
I think Misha.
Okay. This will be easier.
Get a copy of this presentation to put it on your YouTube channel.
Oh, Meshach copied the whole thing too, so
To make sure
that it's good. If not, I have an old one up there. But yes, if you want to email me, and then if it's possible, I'll send it. My email is leslie.caza@gmail.com. So leslie.caza@gmail.com. leslie.caza, cat, apple, zebra, apple, @gmail.com. Yes.
Let's say if you have a sprinkler system, so you need to talk with me, because you mentioned about water
The base.
versus
It's better, especially because the watering system is going to come on every day or every couple of days. You'd be keeping your leaves wet all the day. Now, if it comes on really early in the morning so that the sun and the breeze would have a chance, you could try it. But I would never do that like the middle of the day or especially at the end of the day. Those leaves need to get dry.
Whatever you have to spray for bugs on the grass.
Cover it. Throw something over your stuff so all those chemicals don't get in your food. Okay, any other, yes? Yeah, multiple squares of this. You can do that. If all you want is spinach, do the whole thing in spinach. Yep, yes.
What about tomatoes? Is that any harder?
If you're gonna do tomatoes, then I would do my bed. If you know all you're gonna grow is tomatoes, I would do a 1 foot wide and do it long. Yeah. When I do my tomatoes, I'm doing them on a 2 foot wide, so I do my tomatoes in the back going up the trellis, and then I do peppers or some other low growing plant in the front of them. Yes?
How often do you water your tomatoes?
Whenever the soil feels like it's not as wet as a wrung out sponge. And there's a lot of variables on that, and mulch is marvelous because it will greatly reduce how much you have to water. So if you can put, a good layer of crushed up leaves or something like that, even the wood chips, if you keep them on the top, it's gonna greatly reduce how much you have to water because it's gonna keep your mix dry. And I imagine you're hotter here than I am up in Covington.
Do you use any fertilizer in any of this?
So Mel,
Specifically, tomatoes.
The only thing that I use that is not exactly compost is I buy a composted chicken manure that has a few other little amendments like feather meal and stuff like that. It's called Revita Pro, and sometimes I will add that, often I add that into my garden. I would say it's not an essential. Years ago, when Mel first started, he said that he would sometimes add some bone meal or blood meal to his garden. And for years, the Square Foot Garden Foundation said, no, that's not acceptable. And then I went in the archives and I found Mel's writings and found that. So small amounts of, I would say something organic would be acceptable. I don't like to put chemicals in my square foot garden bed at all. So if you can find a complete organic fertilizer that you want to use, especially if you're concerned that your compost is not that great, you can. But if you use a good variety of compost, you do not need fertilizer. It grows. Think about nature. Look out in the woods. And nobody ever puts anything down, right? And everything grows because the leaves fall, they decompose, the bugs die, the animals do their droppings in the woods, and everything grows beautifully. So we're trying to replicate that. But if you feel like you need something, and this is off the record, I know he's got me on record here, but I would use something like a composted chicken manure that maybe has something like some feather meal added, or so that's my choice. That's what I use.
For watering, do you recommend a sprinkler or to try to water at the ground level?
Ground level.
Not sprinklers.
I try not to use sprinklers. If you're going to use sprinklers, which I don't suggest, but if you're going to use sprinklers, you want to do it early in the morning so that they have the day to dry off. They get the leaves completely dry, but top watering is not as good as ground watering. The other thing is there's something about when you get out there to water, you're actually going to stick your finger in the ground. And you're going to see how wet or dry that is. So if you have something automatic that goes on, like your grass watering system, you might think, oh, it's good. And maybe that system only got the top like this and your roots are down here. So there's something about getting down. That's one of the reasons why we say put the garden close to your house. So you can just go out there and look at it. It's a joy to look at a garden that's not full of weeds. And just stick your finger in. Pick it up. Does it feel like a wet wrung out sponge? It's a wrung out sponge, but it's going to be 90 today, all day, nothing. I better put a little bit of water on it. So you have to play it by ear.
Do you ever use a drip system?
I use a drip system just because I have 5 2x28 foot beds. It would take me forever. Yes. Pine bark. What I mentioned about the bark, if you buy an inexpensive compost at a big box store for like $2 or $3 for a cubic foot, read the back. It probably has ground up bark and sand in it. So you don't want that as one of your 1/3 components in your Mel's mix. It doesn't have the nutrients.
Because of that, I did cut down a pine tree. The bark is coming off.
No, I would not use that. It wouldn't be ground up enough. It wouldn't be fine enough. And I don't know the makeup of pine bark that if you would want to use a whole lot of that on your garden. Yeah, you'd have to do your homework on that one. I wouldn't want to tell you.
So what do you do about the brown spots and the black spots?
What do you do about the brown spots? And it sounds like a fungus. So you could get a copper fungicide or something like that. Best thing to do is try to keep your plants dry so that you don't get funguses and things like that. And yeah, look for varieties that are resistant. When you read the seed packets, look for things that are resistant to disease. And like for your tomatoes and things, if you keep them pruned or all your plants pruned, more air gets in there, you're less likely to get fungus and disease. So pruning makes a big difference. Was there a question here?
Yeah, you said the Mel's mix, you only put in like once every 10 years or something? Or what did you say?
It lasts that long. You don't have to replace it every year. So if you get a vermiculite that's not the coarse vermiculite, it breaks down fast. So with Mel's mix, they say 10 years. I've only been doing square foot gardening for 7, so I don't know if I'm going to make it all the way to 10, but it's due.
What do you add every year? Like in the spring, do you not add anything, or is it like?
Okay, if you have your 6 inches and because of compacting or weather, whatever, it goes down, you've pulled out plants, you can add straight compost in, or you can mix up a little bit more Mel's mix and top off your bed if you want to. But the mix itself does not need to come out and be replaced. You can keep it in your beds until it totally, So I just kind of top it off a little bit, or just add enough compost to bring your beds up again from pulling out and packing. Yes?
Because I love growing stuff and I don't like coming out in the morning and seeing like a cake with my dogs.
Yes, it depends on the pest. So companion planting can help a lot, especially in square foot gardening where every square or every few squares you've got something different. It kind of confuses the insects. If you have a whole field of tomatoes, those hornworms are going to find your tomatoes. But if you have a tomato and a marigold and a pepper and some carrots, you don't have such a big area that they smell it, so you don't get quite as many pests. So companion planting is a biggie. Planting in the right season. I never plant cabbage in the spring. There's too many caterpillars. I don't plant broccoli in the spring. Too many caterpillars. I plant those. I start my seeds inside in August. I plant them outside mid-September or early October. They're maturing in October, November, December. I have no caterpillars, no bugs. So know your season. Squash bugs. Everybody wants to get zucchini. I want this first tomato and the first zucchini. Hold off a little bit till you get kind of past squash bug season. Put your zucchinis out later, like mid-July. You've just missed a whole bunch of them. So timing can be huge on the insect pests, and companion planting can help a lot. And then get out there at least every other day and look at your plants. And if you have tomato hornworms, try to keep your tomatoes thinned enough that and if you have a trellis where the birds can land, and then it's not so dense that the birds can't see, they may help you with some of those insect pests, but they need a place to land. The birds need a place to land, otherwise they won't come, because hawks will come and they know it. Yes?
How do you know when to actually harvest your like I had collard greens, I just didn't know when it was ready for me to actually eat.
Anytime. On collards, you can pick any greens, you can pick baby, you can pick big. Of course, tomatoes when they look right, but anything that's a leaf crop, you can pick it anytime you want. The smaller it is, the tender, but then the less volume you get, so the choice is yours. Was there yes?
What is the best way to skin the slug?
What is the best way to what?
Slug flesh.
Slugs, beer traps. Beer works great. Just take a little, you may be embarrassed buying beer. Get a little peanut butter lid or something, get a little container, put some beer in it, sink it in your stuff. Slugs love beer, they drown themselves. Yeah, slugs like beer. And then don't have a lot of things that they can hide under around the garden. So if you have boards or big things, that they'll get under, and so don't leave a lot of hiding places for the slugs either. Keep it kind of clean around that area because they don't like to dry out, obviously.
Where would you put the beer and put the slugs?
In your garden, wherever your slugs are, put the beer. They don't walk very far, very fast. All right, was there another question? Are we good? Were you all set with questions?
Yeah, tell me how I got this bought up. Compost mixer.
Oh, Meshach. Talk to Meshach. He's the compost mixer guy. All right, if we're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Wow, you guys were really patient. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here with all of you. And if you have any other questions, just come on up. Thank you, Kathy.
I want to thank Leslie for coming today.
Yes.
She almost makes gardening look possible. Because I have found it impossible.
Oh, no. Not
The last 3 years, but I think the Mel's mix might make the difference.
It might.
So I really thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's give her a hand.
Thank you. God has been good. God is good, and I just pray for your gardens.
Let's have prayer for her.
Thank you.
She gets ready to travel.
Thank you.
And she's got how far do you have to travel?
About 3 hours.
3 hours. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that Leslie came today, and we pray in a very special way that she and her husband will have safe travels back. We are so grateful that she has come to share these techniques, and although we're not experts, but it maybe will show us how we can become experts, or at least learn how to grow something.
Amen.
We know you want us to know this, and we pray that we will keep pursuing this. And we thank you so much for this opportunity. We pray especially for Leslie as she travels home.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you all.